in this situation, man, I mean,
good looking.
So I just can't press that, and if you automatically just turn, if I hit that won't just turn off automatically.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta hit for you. Gotta hit for you.
what's today's date?
You gotta wait until it takes out
July
first.
1st.
So you gotta wait till it do crispy. You always take that out. 26 district. Okay, now you want to use
26, right? Yeah.
that's not gonna show you. Maybe we'll go ahead and check here.
You happen to have a piece of paper?
There he is.
Yeah. Thing is,
All right, the one on the right. Okay, there you go.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so you got some paper, somebody's notebook paper, something? Or somebody scratch paper, don't have to be nice formal nothing, man. Just what was it though?
Look a lot. Ready to. What's going on, Kansas City? Now listen to What's Real Talk, KUAW 98.5 LPFM. The call-in number, like always, area code 816-599-6893. And today we're going to have a interesting day. So we have two candidates in the House right now for Missouri House of Representatives 26th District. We got here. We got Ed Bell sitting over here.
Good afternoon.
We got Dylan Bird sitting over here. And the other person that's in the race is Miss Ashley Manlove. My assistant did reach out to her on Friday. We have not had confirmation back from her. So if y'all do know her, tell her to call in, tell her to come down to the station, and she'd like to talk to the people that will be voting on August the 7th. I believe that's when the election is.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all got some materials for me that I can kind of go off of real quick. All right, got bios on here. I'm just going to let y'all introduce yourselves. So right here, Mr. Bird.
All right. Well, my name, as you just heard, is Dylan Bird, and I'm running for the Missouri State House of Representatives 26th District. So a little bit about my background. I'm coming from an education background. I've been working in our schools for about the last 8 years. Moved to Kansas City from a small town called Lebanon, Missouri, and went to UMKC, got my bachelor's in English for high school teaching, and started down south of Ruskin High School. Then I went back to UMKC, got my master's in higher ed administration, and I'm actually going into my 5th year with summer school teaching right now with Guadalupe Centers. And school year before last was doing some work with an education nonprofit at Northeast High School. And then when I decided to kind of take on the run, I stepped back a little in this last school year and have been substitute teaching while I run for office here.
Okay, Mr. Evans.
Yes, sir. Kansas City native, born and raised in Kansas City. My background is very expansive. It's been a journeyman's resume. I have been in a non-for-profit, running a couple of non-for-profits, working in community organizations, doing program and project management. I also come from an educator background. Have a national teaching certification. I've taught K through 12 in adult education. I've also been involved in education administration as a dean and a principal as well for an alternative charter high school. Currently serving as an executive consultant, helping businesses grow and expand, helping people meet capacity requirements and needs, as well as serving as your 5th District PIAC representative, which stands for Public Improvement Advisory Committee. We oversee pretty much sales tax money and redirect those funds for capital improvement and neighborhood projects improvements.
All right. And just for full disclosure, again, you listening What's Real Talk, KUAW. The call-in number is area code 816-599-6893. You can hit us up on this Facebook page, which is KUAW LPFM 98.5. If you're looking at it on my Facebook feed, you get a much better integrated audio and video experience by going to the KUAW page. Like I told Mr. Bird before, and this is just for everybody out there watching, I do have know Mr. Bell. I've been knowing Ed since I went to school. We used to play basketball together. He could not stop the crossover. I'm not going to hold it against him. So if you have any questions, call in. And again, it's an open, honest forum. This is being brought to you underscore by We the People, where we try to bring you authentic candidates. And we'll have a candidate forum July the 11th at Bluford Library. And that's just for informational purposes only. So just jumping right in it, man. I heard you was a teacher. I know you got a background in education. So I think we have a caller already. But while that caller's calling, what made you want to run for office?
Absolutely. Well, after working in education for about the last 8 years, you can only go so long without basic material supplies in your classroom to be able to do what your job is to do as a teacher. And then, even if you were to have those supplies and resources, if you pay for it out of your pocket with the low teacher salary that you have, you can only do so much from the schoolhouse whenever our families are struggling with living wages and access or affordability to health care, or an opportunity or affordability for a higher education or trade school. I myself was a first-generation college student and graduate from a low-income single mother household, lived with my grandma. I know how much student debt I've accumulated as a result of that, and how much we need student debt reform and living wages. And beyond that, I'm also running because I am a gay man, and as a gay man married to a Latino DACA recipient, I also feel a very strong duty to stand up and speak out against discrimination in all of its forms. And so, as a teacher in some of our schools that have been the most underserved, the most under-resourced, underfunded, I've just felt loudly called to leave the schoolhouse and try to head towards the State House, where the root of the problems that are making my life, my job harder, the lives of my students and our families that much harder is coming from the State House. And I'm just sick of kind of feeling like a peg in a system that's not able to do much about it. And I'm ready to show up before I give up. So, I'm just kind of tired of watching and listening to some of these folks talk the nice talk for a long time. And sometimes, unfortunately, they don't walk the walk. And you look at who funded their campaign, and sometimes it answers why. And so, I'm committed to lifting up those voices and needs of our families and students.
Okay, Mr. Ed Bell, what made you run?
Just wanting to provide an alternative for hope and leadership in our community. I felt the leadership deficits. I'm pretty sure a lot of other Missourians have as well. And having the expertise and background in working across different areas, different sectors, looking at it from an educational standpoint, I was surprised at how many teachers have to pay for materials out of their own pocket. Just the gaps in service that require community participation, that require our communities to be synergistic in meeting the needs of our citizens. So I wanted to be a leadership model and a captain of a team that is bringing people together to find common solutions to common problems.
All right. So I'm going to keep pinging back and forth. Since I started over here with Mr. Bird, how would you actually accomplish some of this? Because both of y'all are talking about, let me preface it real quick. Both of y'all are talking about education and the lack there, the inequalities that y'all seen in the educational system that kind of perpetuated some of the social concerns, and I'm mediating between both commentaries, some of the social concerns, and that's why y'all got in office. So how would you actually go about alleviating any of them?
So I'll go to the spirit of your question. That is, how are you going to do this coalition building? How are you going to get these people to come together? When I got to PIAC, Public Improvement Advisory Committee, I was told, Ed, you're going to have to fight for every dime and dollar you get, period. And I can tell you that has been not the case. And actually, for the first time, we were able to get all the districts to give something that's just in the 5th district. The Kansas City Community Gardens expansion campaign was one of my first victories as a PIAC rep. What I did was went there on my own, visit them after they made their presentation, met with the group, thought about some strategies we could use to bring in some consensus, made that lobbying call and cry to my constituents and my PIAC teammates, and brought everybody together, let them see the commonalities and the good points and the shared benefits of it. And it became a new narrative. And now on PIAC, every district looks for something that we can support in everybody's district. So again, it's just about finding the common denominators, bringing people together, and then creating that win-win situation for people at the table, and to make sure that it's sustainable.
All right, Mr. Dylan Byrd, how would you go about accomplishing some of it?
Sure. So similar to what Ed just said here, I think it really comes down to bringing people together, that coalition building, just bringing people to the table to have their voice, their needs heard. And I think that what we've been seeing for so long is that those voices haven't been heard. They've been ignored. And as I've been going and knocking on doors in our neighborhoods, you know, we talk to folks sometimes who say, I've lived here since the 60s. I've lived here since the 80s. And you're the first person to ever knock on my door. And so if folks aren't getting out into the neighborhoods, you know, for me, another reason why I was inspired to get involved is because I have for so long felt that there's such a detachment between so many of our publicly elected officials and the realities of what are going on, or what's going on in our communities. And so, you know, really door to door knocking, bringing community issues, community forums, town halls, things like that, to have discussions, open, honest, transparent discussions on, you know, our education system, the pros, cons, where, you know, in my opinion, I think there's definitely more cons in these vouchers and choice systems, charter schools that siphon money from our public school systems. But additionally, I want to, you know, not only work to fully fund our public, you know, schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, but I want to see tuition-free pre-K through higher education as a whole, and you know, working to eradicate student debt. And you know, a question people ask is, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that? And the interesting thing, I think, again, it comes down to just educating about the resources that we already have and are already using and spending. And you know, in this last year, the GOP tax cut alone could have funded you know, free healthcare for everybody for a number of years, or free higher education for a number of years. And you know, not only with that tax cut, but even in this last year, just the amount that has been added to our military budget and spending that wasn't even asked for. That you know, we've already got, you know, more in our military budget than the next 10 countries combined. And you know, just in this last year alone, we lopped on another you know, however many billions of dollars to that could have alleviated so many more issues for, you know, everyday ordinary individuals and citizens in our communities. So
hold on, let me do this real quick. You listening to What's Real Talk 98.5. The call-in number is area code 816-599-6893. If you're looking at it on my Facebook page, please go to the KUAW-LP FM 98.5 page, and you will have a much better audio and video experience. Before we get into deep into ideology and deep into talking about issues, people that watch this show, they know that I try to speak as honestly and as real as I can. So I'm about to start agitating and messing with y'all a little bit on issues and on what's actually going on, because I heard a couple things that makes me want to get involved. Like, you know, I heard about vouchers and stuff like that. So we're going to get to issues, but I want to get a couple more personal questions out the way. And again, this is full disclosure. That's why I put it out there. So I'm not picking sides on this. What examples of organizing can you give us right now? And I asked that because he gave us a direct example of PIAC. So do you have any direct examples that you can give us right now? I'm going to go back and forth off of different things that y'all said.
For sure. So A couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I was actually part of the leadership organizing team of the Kansas City chapter of Democratic Socialists of America. Some folks may have heard more references to that organization as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just won her district in New York over a 10-year incumbent, and she is running as a progressive Democrat like myself, but also identifies with the Democratic Socialists of America. And so I was very much honored to be a part of that leadership team, getting that chapter established and going here. And of course, they are moving forward with a lot of progressive initiatives in the city and state and country.
All right, since I gave them a follow-up to that, do you have any other examples of organizing that you want to put out there real quick before I move on to another question?
Of course. Just on a 5 feet from the ground level, oftentimes when we do developments, there are participation gaps. There may be an expectation or a set level, and then general contractors are looking for opportunities to meet those participations. And so I've been in a fortunate position to work with subs and generals in organizing fairs, forums, hiring events, educational opportunities to connect and bridge those gaps. Also, in working with our local municipality and providing workforce development and training programs, neighborhood works and public works programs. Have been very involved in providing the soft skills and the technical aspect of professionalism and business management alongside of those programs. So there's been times where I'm working with other alphabet organizations as well as the municipality to provide public forums and public benefit programs.
All right. So what do y'all think? And this is open for whoever wants to jump in first. All right. So this is one of those questions that a lot of times the debates and forums, people sit back, they hear a question, and then they're able to think about what they want to say because it goes in a certain order. So I want to see who the first one wants to jump on this. What's the number one issue, priority facing the 26th district, and how are you going to work to actually fix that issue?
Well,
Go ahead.
I made my smack first. Sorry. So I'm
from the 50s. I like fights. So.
Right. I think, in my opinion, which is kind of ties into a number of things, but I think the number one priority issue, not only in the 26th district, but facing our state, country, and world is climate change. And I think in a lot of ways that ties into the issues in our district with housing and with employment. And, when our...
Now, I told y'all I'm going to start messing with y'all, right? So how does climate change affect people that stay off of 76 and Pacell?
So climate change affects everyone everywhere, considering that if we don't, do something to make things more sustainable, move away from fossil fuel industry, I'm a firm believer in the scientific evidence and proof that's showing where we're headed in terms of climate change. And if we want, to have a livable, sustainable planet for, generations to come, we're going to have to do something about it. And so, really any of these other issues we're talking about are kind of unimportant if we're not doing something to even maintain a planet that's habitable.
Now, I agree with you. I'm coming right to you because I have a rating with the environmental protection agencies. So I agree with you with the climate change and environment being an issue. But I'm going to come back after Mr. Bell.
I breathe, therefore I'm an environmentalist, right? So I mean that's a given. But to take it from a 50 foot from the ground to a 5 feet from the ground perspective, those major issues that are really affecting the 26th district are really about the lack of leveraging and the lack of synergistic approaches to our public service. I mean, we have capacity building opportunities all abound, and we're missing it. Cerner, the largest development in Missouri history. There's great opportunity to do capacity building, not just on the hard skills and the construction side, but the soft skills and the technical side, as well as growing the capacity of existing businesses that have been involved and have been in play for some time. We look at the housing situation. Kansas City has a national model to remedy poverty for the nation. And I'll give it to you in 2 minutes later down the show. But again, we have elements that you can incorporate that don't require anybody to do anything different, because once you do that, it's not sustainable. That becomes a model for the nation. We're talking about home ownership. We need to transfer gross earners to net earners. In other words, if you can take a half of a paycheck and pay all your bills, as opposed to taking 1.5 and pay your bills, now you're really in a position to have some upward mobility. And that's what we have to do. We have to leverage our elements and the opportunities around to create that real upward mobility. I call it transferring people from gross earners to net earners.
Now, see, I'm starting to dig this. We're starting to get to some differences. You listen to What's Real Talk, KUAW. The calling number is area code 816-599-6893. The Facebook page is KUAW LPFM 98.5. So we heard environment is a top issue in the 26th district from Mr. Byrd, and then we heard economic incentives of development.
We're leveraging the economic development for capacity building.
No, thank you.
We need to be specific on that, because again, it's not just about going vertical and building some edifice, right? Because again, we treat participation requirements as the floor, not the ceiling. I mean, as the ceiling and not the floor. And really, it's the floor. So if we got a 10 and 2 or 10% and 2%, that needs to be the floor. That needs not to be what we're shooting for. That needs to be at minimum, right? And if we know that we're not meeting that, you don't continue business as usual. You get ingenuitive, you get outside the box, and you get synergistic, you get collaborative, and you bring people and entities together that can build and expand that capacity. Because again, once somebody else has an opportunity to rise up, right, it raises the overall playing field overall. And so we're really talking about improving the quality of the same way you do development, the same way you do renovations. You don't do spot, you do sections, right? And so you have to do more grouping. It has to be more comprehensive and encompassing.
Now, and again, I'm digging it. You listening to Ed Bell and Dylan Byrd, both candidates for the 26th district state house. The election comes up August the 7th. I'm hearing interesting things from both sides, and like I said, I'm gonna throw out a little fodder here and there until I get more questions on there. We do have people that's watching this, so I think they're just interested in what you guys are saying. As a representative, I've noticed both issues, right? So I noticed a lack of environmental concern when it comes to the city of Kansas City and my colleagues when it comes to the 31st Street area with all those people that's been suffering down there because of the inner city oil situation. Right. We can't even get the congressman to come out and address the situation, nor any reps. And also the lack of economic incentives, economic advancement. And you mentioned something that's been one of the issues I've been having, and that will go to CERN. So I'm gonna ask both of you this question because it will be in that district.
I was actually gonna want to follow up.
So I'm gonna go ahead and let you go ahead and jump in and follow up.
Sure, yeah. So speaking of CERN, I mean, obviously I acknowledge the environment thing is much bigger, but so coming down more a little specific, talking about things like CERN, things that we're talking about as we knock on doors with people as far as what they're saying they want to see addressed and improved is the housing issue, the wage issue, the healthcare issue, and having more quality schools. And so the interesting thing about CERN is that when that was built in our city, that was allegedly such a great job creator, and the fact is that Cerner actually took about $1.1 billion subsidy to build their South Campus here, and that $1.1 billion subsidy ends up kind of taking our funds away from libraries, from schools.
I'm gonna ask y'all a quick question real quick. Then I'm gonna tell you what I did. So would y'all vote yes or no on the Cerner deal? Would you vote yes or no on it?
I would vote yes if there wasn't a public subsidy of $1.1 billion whenever this is a corporation that racks in about $3 to $5 billion a year and the CEO's got about $1.9 billion in his bank account. I think that that is indicative of so much of the problems that we're facing as a country. Is so much of the concern priority is put into the corporate interest and the corporate profit, when at the end of the day, our students down the street in the school at Ruskin High School, down next to Cerner campus, aren't getting an education quality high enough to even get the higher education or afford the higher education to be able to work at Cerner in the first place.
Let me get to Ed real quick because we have a question on here.
I'll read
yes or no? Would you vote yes or no?
I'll redirect the trajectory of that question. I would not have voted for a deal if I couldn't have got a substantial amount of benefits for my community, which is going to be in. You cannot come in my community and be a divester.
All right, and I told you I was going to tell you what I did after it. I voted no on the bill. I was like one of the only KC reps that was like, no, I'm not going to vote on it for several reasons. Cerner was a package deal. You actually gave us some of the dollar signs on it, but it had nothing to do with benefiting the community. If you go out to the Cerner campus, you'll see that the campus encompasses a so-called minority area. And it'd be hard to find so-called minorities that work at that site that live in that area around there. Question coming directly off of here. I think we have two of them. Talk is good, but what about common residents. I've only seen one candidate actually going to the people and dealing with domestic violence and women issues. So when it comes to domestic violence and women issues, what would you actually do? And do you guys know of any state resources or programs that deals with it? And the reason I'm asking you this gives underlying understanding as opposed to just talking about an issue. So again, I don't care who goes first, who wants to go.
So yeah, of course. I mean, nobody has a right to feel unsafe in our community. And so, yes, there definitely needs to be an identification and a coordination of what resources are available to provide wraparound services. Because just removing somebody from the environment isn't just enough. Just going to counseling a couple days a week by itself isn't just enough. Having an extracurricular activity or some counseling that's interactive isn't just enough. These things need to work in concert and in tandem. And so oftentimes, I think people in their perspective lanes want to address it from their angle. In other words, the legislator will want to write more laws, right? Somebody who's on the community wants to get out and go march some more, or have some more vigils, right? But we need to bring those elements together. And so those who are making laws need to have the direct input of those who are directly impacted by those laws, and those who are receiving appropriations and fundings for state and local services need to hear what that equation needs to encompass so that they can cater their services toward meeting the needs of the people.
Mr. Byrd.
Yeah, I mean, domestic violence is a very serious issue that I think ties into so many other issues, like our gun issue. You know, the fact that we don't keep track of who is, displaying violent behaviors and ensuring that there aren't processes, procedures in place to where those folks who have, already indicated that they, will do those kinds of things potentially can freely go and purchase firearms and things like that. So in my mind, that, when you mentioned domestic violence, that's where my mind went straight to, is the gun issue, because so many women end up, even if they report domestic violence, and even if charges or this or that are made, at the end of the day, our gun laws in our state and in our country allow for those folks to essentially go and freely obtain any kind of firearm to then further carry out, even worse results there. And unfortunately, it is a very, very high statistic that shows domestic abusers to be the perpetrators of those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of really, really great organizations and nonprofits in the Kansas City area that specifically work with, victims of that kind of trauma and victims of domestic violence. And I think just really from the start, being an educator working in our schools, just getting that kind of an education. I don't see there being as much of intentional character building or curriculum
life
as far
skills,
as, right,
yeah, exactly.
in our schools to really just develop you personally as a healthy individual to respect.
Well, I'm gonna come to the school question because y'all keep touching on it. I got to read this though. I think this was directed towards, I'm not sure because I didn't put a name on there, but they said political answers not realistic. Another issue, and we'll get to this because I'm integrated kind of with schools. Another issue would be climate concerns may be an issue, but that is not the game changer for impacting lives immediately in the 26th district. There is a need for accessible resources for the community. So after we come back from education, we want to ask you guys about what type of accessible resources as a rep would you be able to provide the city to alleviate issues. And also on the domestic violence question, I think they was trying to get more to the sentiment of if you guys actually understood the issue and what type of beneficial help you would be able to get. And I give you some examples. Since I've been in office, I've dealt with various entities, and when it comes to domestic violence organizations, most of these organizations are severely underfunded, right? Even when we talk about the shelters for the women, et cetera, and I kind of want to jump in on some of these issues, but I can't because then I'd be,
Getting your platform.
Man, but I want to because y'all saying some things that make me want to jump in. Let's go to education because I keep hearing education as an underlying thing. So as a representative, what would y'all do with education? I'm gonna start intervening if it's something that's outside of the scope. That way we can keep it 100% germane
and keep it realistic. Education is When I got in education, it really brought into my mind how you really can connect with families, because that's where the kids are at, right? And kids don't show up by themselves. So, you're able to create the pipeline of connectivity to households, starting with the kids. And then oftentimes there's family members that are involved, big mama, auntie, grandma, cousin, big bro. And so you're able to touch the household via that avenue. And when we talk about issues like we did, like with domestic violence or those kind of things, there's a reverberation that doesn't just stay to the couple, right? The kids are impacted, the family's impacted. And so that gives us an opportunity to, in a very realistic way, use those alphabet organizations like Link, 4-H Club, Boys and Girls Club, those type of things, Boys and Girl Scouts as well, and to integrate social learning, life skills, conflict resolution, coping mechanism skills that provide that whole wraparound service and growing of a person. Because there's an academic learning that goes on in school, but there's also a social learning that goes on in schools. And so we have a creative opportunity as legislators to use our platform to highlight and bring awareness to the various issues, life skills, and subject matter that we want to, and bridge by bringing in those subject matter experts, because to the people 5 feet from the ground, they're unknowns. They don't know this organization exists. They don't know this person's there. But if you're the change agent and you're the servant, then it's your obligation to go meet those people where they are and get them to where they need to be. And in a very realistic way, that's going to the site, assessing what they need, using and leveraging your relationships and bringing those entities to those people and letting them work it out.
All right, Mr. Bird, before you respond, the reason the other candidate isn't on the show, we reached out to her Friday. I'm not sure if she received the email or not in time, but we did not receive confirmation. But if you do know her, tell her she can call in. She can come down here to the studio. We'd love to have her on. And We the People will also be hosting a forum July the 11th, 5:30 to 7:30 at Bluford Library. Big T, what's going on, man?
Say the name of the candidates again.
Dylan Bird and Ed Bell. And Ashley Manlove.
Yeah.
Ashley Bland Manlove.
Okay, cool. We had a few questions. They were asking what were their names.
Yeah, I can't see those questions up there. You're going to have to read those off to him.
Okay, we got Thurman Davis. He's watching. We got Cherry Moore Barnes. She's watching. James Rogers. He's watching. And Chris Jackson. They're watching. Hi, who is the guest speaking? That was Cherry Moore Barnes. And that's about it.
All right, again, you listen to What's Real Talk, KUAW, LPFM. Calling number area code 816-599-6893. And Mr. Bird, you was about to respond to the education question.
Yes. So, similarly to like Ed said, our students are the connection to our community, our families. That is a source and location where we have so much opportunity to, to build and support. And so, in looking at our state's funding, just looking at our schools funding, like I said in the beginning of this, that is definitely what has highly motivated me to get involved, because the fact is that money is just not being provided to allow for a basic, adequate education quality for our students in Kansas City. And
so you're saying the historical funding that the Republicans said they did this year is it historical?
It might be the most that has ever been given, but when you're so inadequate, given the most is still not going to get you what you need. And so, like I said, some schools that I've worked in, there is not basic material supplies resources. There's not basic staffing for even core classes, multiple teachers leaving throughout the year. You don't have basic curriculum that builds some of those life skills, that builds some of those personal, character traits that like conflict resolution and things like that. And, I was very fortunate to go to a school that had some of those things. And I personally know how much, how helpful those were in my personal, professional, academic development to be a part of a band and a marching band or a choir or, a number of sports. And when I go into schools, much less in a city like Kansas City, that's allegedly, got all this history in jazz, to go into any school that can't afford to have a music program is, in my opinion, quite embarrassing as a country. And so we're not, we're just not prioritizing that. We're not prioritizing teachers and their pay and their when we look at some of these states across the country, and honestly, I would not mind to see Missouri participate in places like West Virginia, Colorado, Kentucky, Arizona, where they shut down every district in the state until some improvements were made to teacher pay, to school funding, to where the job that they are there to do and have spent a lot of time, energy, effort, and money to get an education, a degree, to do work that is obviously necessary to the functioning of our society and country. Changes need to come. So
no, go ahead. I was going to jump in.
As a legislator, I think that we have to hold true to our principles, but also be mindful of the varying demographics and dynamics across the state. I mean, Republicans are touting 13 million more for education this year, 37% of the general revenue fund, all that fun. But again, this is where I say our legislators could really be creative and ingenuitive, but really leaders. And when we're dealing with the business community and the development community that's coming in, it needs to have a different connotation of conversation when we talk about benefits, so that when we're talking about benefits to the school, hey, if your organization provides something or has access to something that can directly benefit the classroom, let's make that part of the equation. So if we build a new Walmart somewhere, right, then let's make sure some of that inventory, some of that product is being directed right in a way that they can get their tax benefits too, but that the students can have resources. I mean, there's nothing really off the table when it comes to having a discussion and trying to problem solve. But what needs to happen is that people needs to have the mindset and the heart to say, hey, let's take care of people and let's meet and come up with some real solutions.
All right, and I'm about to change it up a little bit. Now, go ahead, Big T.
Or charter schools doing better than public schools?
I think it's a matter of perspective. As an educator, I'm for as many educational opportunities as possible. And because, again, St. Louis and Kansas City are very pole to some of the other areas that are in Missouri. And so there may be a need for an alternative educational tool and option to meet the needs that a public or some other type of school isn't meeting. I went to Milwaukee a few years ago and they had a Raise the Cap campaign, and I sat with the public school board president and charter school board public president, and they sat together in unison as a team and said this can work. So again, I don't think it has to be a all or nothing situation. We just need to be mindful and fluid of the situations that affect various, and let's come up with some solutions.
Before I let you respond, the call-in number is area code 816-599-6893. Again, the call-in number is area code 816-599-6893. The link is KUAW LPFM 98.5. Mr. Berger responded, and I'm about to change the pace up a little bit on here.
Sure. So
I got me wondering.
Yeah, so charter schools, it's an interesting and kind of contentious discussion. I think, there's very, very clear, obvious evidence of many charter schools in our city that do absolutely fantastic, great work. And, at the end of the day, I don't believe it's necessarily, I don't think teachers or families necessarily go, oh, I'm, wanting to just teach or be at a charter school. It's, they have a job to do. They want to do it at a place where they have support and resources. And some charters are able to do that more than our public schools. And so there are definitely outstanding charter schools doing great work. However, I think at the end of the day, many charter schools are able to set their own kind of standards, their own kind of admissions, and they don't have to accept, maybe every student that might need an IEP or, special education services. And so they're kind of able to pick and choose who they accept. And, additionally, some of the funds that go to charter schools end up being siphoned away from our public schools. And so, there are those charter schools that function just like public schools, accept every student and provide sped services, but there are many that set up kind of their own. They don't, and at the end of the day, it can sometimes be making a private interest money rather than serving the students.
Hey, hold on.
I need to give some
hold on real quick, T, because I want to get this question in before we get the caller in. Very simple. Yes or no? Do you support charter schools or not?
Yes. Let me tell you, the school that I was at, I'm gonna leave it nameless, but when we closed that school, 6 of my students died that year. Now we talk about charter schools that have requirements and admission policies how they want to, but there are also some charter schools that take the least of these where they can't go anywhere else. And I've sat in auditoriums and sanctuaries hearing women give the greatest of praise because they're seeing their babies cross that stage with a diploma when there was no other option other than this place. Right. So I'm for as many educational opportunities as possible.
Hold on, Mr. Bill. Yes or no? Sports, because I know we got a caller on the line. Support charter schools or not?
That's a hard question. I support public charter schools that accept students just like a public school would.
And you know what?
The fact is, he said that the fact that there wasn't any other option, and I think that's the root of the issue is that we have moved away from there being a public neighborhood school option. And so the fact is many of these charter schools where, there's lotteries or, however many limited seats to where sometimes it can end up leaving, students and families who may be less privileged and less fortunate, who might not have transportation or things like that to get to these other schools. It leaves them with the only options a lot of times being left with public schools that have been underfunded or had more funding taken from them and put to the charter schools. And like I said, some of those students who go to these charter schools, sometimes they don't make it academically, behaviorally, whatever, they get sent out. And what's left for them is to go to the public school that they are assigned to, yet that money does not follow them from the charter.
Now we're going to actually get into the weeds of the funding because we have another listener on here that's actually asking about the funding. Just for full disclosure, I've actually been trying to break up the way public education is administrated, and I get into that when we get back. Go ahead, caller.
Go ahead, caller.
Okay, hi. I'm calling in with two things that I want to discuss. First of all, Mr. Bill, it seems like you're doing want to do the same funding for the same gifters that are already getting the funding for these programs. When you mentioned the big companies, nothing about the small mom and pop organizations, which is very disgusting. Second of all, for you two to be young people, you're not bringing any new ideals. That has to be something to attract younger voters. And we were hoping with the younger people running that y'all could come up with something different. But if y'all still doing the same old thing and have the same ideals that the people that are presently in office and previously been in office, it's no hope. And thirdly, I've only seen one of you guys in my community. I've seen and noticed that y'all going to political people for their support, but not us common people. And that's discouraging because it seems like the same old will be continuing. And this is Miss Keith.
All right. It was Miss Keith?
No, Miss E. I know exactly who that is.
Yeah. I was trying to get to the core. So, okay, I would say, and I respectfully
well, let me throw it out there because I think I know what it is. And that's why I said I was going to change the trajectory up a little bit. So it's one thing to answer a question in a safe about form. It's another thing to answer a question with a workable form, right? And I was going to start doing some little commentary because I'm hearing answers but knowing answers, and I'm giving people examples. So it's like when you're in a meeting and you hear politicians get up and say infrastructure, and everybody's confused. Certain people know exactly what that infrastructure means. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit to get cleaner, crisper answers. And I think that's where it came from because I've seen that comment coming around the question with domestic violence. And that will go to the allocation of funds or the lack thereof allocations of funds that we've been seeing from the city, the county, and lack of emphasis from people in office at the state level of actually helping out and settle. Two questions I'm gonna throw in there, and I'm gonna try to get a short answer. So I'm gonna answer like this: vouchers, yes or no? No to vouchers, yes or no?
I'm still out on it again. I don't really have a yes or no on that, to be honest, because again, I don't look at things from a monolithic perspective. I'm just in Kansas City. We're going to represent the state. I represent my community, my constituency, but I also have to work with people from the state.
Well, for the 26th district,
for the 20,
would it be a good thing? Now, let me ask the question first.
Okay,
so I'm not leaning. Is this a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to vouchers for the 26th district?
For the 26th district, more than likely, no, would not be a good idea. But for rural areas or whatnot, where you have a stringent or a lack of public services available or whatnot, you have to be creative and explore your options. You got a private partner that's wanting to come in and leverage and give some money and some resources, right? And you can hold them to the table accountable, and you would explore that option.
Now I'm about to come to 10. And I'm gonna give y'all a little something. Big T, what's going on?
I just want to say, go ahead and define voucher.
From my understanding, it would be the amount of money that's allocated per student that would go to that student's assigned traditional public school setting. It would be redirected to the school of that student's assignment if it's in a public or charter, private or charter situation.
And I apologize, I forgot to do this. This is Ed Bell running for the 26th district, and we have Dylan Bird running for the 26th district. I had to comment on here. What was the guest names again?
Sure. So yeah, similar like just said, vouchers being those kinds of funds allocations from a student who would be going to a public school if they get into that charter school, that then that voucher kind of goes with it there.
So, let's have a little bit of fun here, though. So both of y'all running as a Democrat. Now I'm coming back to you, man. But we're about to hit on education a little bit.
I do too, because I got some respectful pushback to the elder in my community. I got some respectful pushback, but yeah, I got some pushback.
I'm gonna let y'all get to that because I'm gonna let y'all go in. I want to get this out though because we're on education. Y'all kind of got me interested. So at the beginning of the show, we heard both of y'all have a background in teaching various levels. Both of y'all concerned with education. Public schools. The current state of public schools is not beneficial to Black folks, so-called minorities, at all. I don't care if it's Kansas City, I don't care if it's St. Louis, or any of the other smaller municipalities in between, because we see that Kansas City and St. Louis continuously has problems, which goes to the other question I had on here, which is funding is very important. Why do different districts receive different funding? Right, so it all ties in together, and it ties in with the vouchers. So I'm gonna ask y'all a weighted question here. Public education as it stands right now, are we willing to support it the way that is being commissioned, or does it need to be destroyed and revamped?
Here's my issue, and this is just personal, right? You know, when the system and the game plan doesn't work for you, then you want to just totally eradicate and tear down the system, as opposed to getting savvy, getting intelligent, and working within it to make the changes that you need. Because again, we may say we want a different kind of a politician or a different kind of public servant. He'll never get there if you don't vote. So if you don't go vote and participate in how the system is, that change doesn't come. So again, we need to have that same common sense perspective.
But question for you.
Yes, sir.
Isn't the system built off policies and procedures, right? So an institution.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about the educational institution, it's built off policies and procedures, which goes back to the funding, the voucher questions, which opens up the door for different policies and procedures.
But it's two different fronts, because one is a historical, because there's a historical precedent and tone that's been set by policy, right? How school districts are funded by personal property taxes. And we know if we can create new developments further away from urban areas, we can create a higher tax base. It's going to create an inherent disadvantage as far as funding goes. And we'll be able to say, but that's the standard. So we understand we need to address that. But again, that goes back to the wraparound. And we need to be dealing with that student and that student's community, because we can do improvements for the student's community to raise property value so that there's more tax revenue going, so it directly impacts the classroom. But again, we talk about new and ingenuitive things. There really aren't new ingenuitive things. We need to just be more proactive about the approaches. And that is when you have community entities and organizations and leaders who are on the ground, allow them to come into the school and work with the school. Provide those auxiliary resources, right? And if there's a way to create a funding opportunity for them, then let's move some of that money to those organizations, because that creates another level of sustainability.
Hold on, let me get to Mr. Bird to respond on this. I know we have a caller on the line.
Sure. So I don't know. I kind of disagree just a little bit. I think that, again, not destroying it would be something that would necessarily need to happen by any means. When I look at what would be the best for our students in our district and really best for students in our state, I look to really the nation that has #1 education in the world, and that's Finland. And when you look at the way that they have it, every school has the same standards, they have the same funding, they have all of those resources in place and all that staffing in place. And so, going back, it really does come back down to funding, where, we have been moving funding from our public neighborhood schools to charters or private schools that, again, may or may not accept all students and may or may not hold the same kind of standards or accountability. And so, with the mention of potentially bringing in some of these outside organizations or entities, particularly corporate ones, I get real nervous, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I I think I'm the only one in this race not accepting any corporate PAC money of any sort. And that's because, when we look at how much these corporations really just exploit our communities and our workers and our students, and really at the end of the day make it about their profit margins and their CEOs, and conveniently some of these folks running for office get their campaigns funded with a pretty nice hefty check from some of these corporate interests. And so I am very weary to ever think that a corporation interest is really at the end of the day for our students or for our communities, considering that has pushed us to where we are today with 3 individuals in our country owning as much wealth as the bottom 50%.
All right. And I know we have a call on the line, so I'm going to go to the caller. I'm going to throw this out too. 14.5 per pupil in Kansas City. They get paid more than anybody around here. Why is their education worse than everybody else? Go to the caller, please.
All right, caller, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Hello, Representative Ellington and your guest. I saw Ed Bell. This is William Wells. I'm with the STEAM Village.
Good afternoon.
So when I hear you talking education, that intrigues me, because we are after-school program that's been self-funded, funded by the parents and some small organizations. Haven't seen the millions and millions of dollars that have been thrown at education, public, charter, or the other, post-secondary institutions. So I would be interested in knowing where do they stand and what is their strategy on being able to get programs like ours that are proving results without money being a part of the equation into the schools and to the students in the community.
Want to jump on that first?
Oh, by all means. Thank you, and I appreciate your concern. I share the same concerns. It's really about school leadership, making avenues accessible, making making doors open so that community members feel welcome to come into their neighborhood and community schools. The district has to have initiatives and a transparent policy and practice to allow those who have expertise and want to make contributions to the schools, to the school districts, to the student, to allow them to do that. And so I think that's the first thing. That has to be transparent and it has to be open from a district and from a school building standpoint. But then we have to have our school leaders, our principals, our vice principals, our deans, and our lead teachers reaching out and to various community members, to the churches, to the mosques, to the synagogues, to the community events, to the civic organizations, and saying, hey, come in and bring those intangibles that provide wraparound life skills and learning for our students that supplement the educational needs that we have.
All right, Mr. Bird, we're going to have to kind of speed it up because that way we can get more questions in.
For sure. I mean, I think as far as a community goes, there should be any kind of nonprofit, community organizations, individuals who should be welcomed into our schools to help out in any way that they see fit or that their organization works with. Obviously, I think, we've mentioned a couple that work in our schools like Link, Jumpstart, City Year just got started here. But at least for some of those, actually, when I look down at their funding, these organizations are putting our schools, obviously, put more bodies in there, more relationships, more resources and things. And inevitably, of course, they do have, increased results, better outcomes. However, in some of those organizations I mentioned, when you look at their funding, they're also funded by some of the wealthiest organizations, individuals in the world. And so, we have these volunteer organizations where we work with people in our schools 50 to 60 hours a week and pay them about $4 an hour and call it a volunteer thing. And then at the end, they get a little stipend to chip away at their massive student loan debt. But at the end of the day, some of those social justice organizations are also being funded by, the reason I left one of them, that organization was being funded by some of the same funders of the Dakota Access Pipeline while they were shooting Native Americans, hosing down in freezing rain, and, have the ability from tax revenue, which many of those corporations which were funding that organization didn't pay a dime in taxes, to fully fund our schools, fully fund higher education, to where those needs and services wouldn't even be necessary because the school would already be equipped with the curriculum, with the resources, with the staffing, and with that funding.
All right, we have about 7 minutes on here. I'm going to try to do a real quick lightning round. You listen to What's Real Talk, KUAW, LPFM. Calling number is area code 8165. No calling. Okay. Yeah, we got 7 minutes. All right, quick question. I'm going to try to run through some stuff. criminal code. We revamped the criminal code 2 years ago. Would you have voted yes on the? Is this fair? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can't answer that question because it wouldn't be fair. I'm gonna let y'all wrap up and give us y'all closing statement because I can't ask y'all about particular votes without seeing the whole
I'm putting my stuff
impact
before
of
I
the
didn't come back
legislation.
in
That
here.
wouldn't be fair at all.
Oh, Gina ready. See you, beautiful Gina ready.
And for those that are watching, remember that.
Thank you, beautiful. Oh, no, don't let don't make me bow.
We're not gonna
Thank
be able to
you.
get to you because we have to let them do their wrap up. So, who wants to start? I can't remember. Mr. Bird.
Well, I'll just reiterate by sharing with folks about myself that I am a first-generation college student and graduate from a low-income single-mother household, and as such, I know how much we need student debt reform and living wages, and I'm running for office because as a gay man married to a DACA recipient Latino and as a teacher of majority students of color that, I know I have a duty to stand up, speak out against discrimination in all its forms. And so as a teacher in some of our most underserved, under-resourced schools in our city, I'm loudly called to leave our schoolhouse, head towards the State House, where the root of those issues and problems are making my life and job harder and the lives of our students, their families harder. And, I think for far too long, we've been watching our elected officials put the profits of the wealthiest individuals and corporations above the needs of our poor and working class people. And I'm committed to lifting up those voices and needs. And I think that's clear in my commitment to not accept 1 cent of corporate PAC money, because I'm just sick of watching those folks talk the nice talk, but they don't match it with their walk. And you watch who funds their campaigns and the priorities become.
So is it safe to say you signed the Eric Greitens pledge? Sorry. I have no sense. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Edward Bell, candidate for 26th District State Representative, Missouri. Native Kansas City and child from the village. Proud product of a single parent home. My mother, Evelyn Hedge, is my shero. But I'm also a child of the village. There have been many of sets of hands that have helped raise and groom me. So I just feel an intrinsic need to give a return on investment to my community. Graduated from Bishop Hogan, graduating from Park University, graduating from Benedictine, and currently finishing my ed specialist at UMKC. I'm just concerned and caring about the locality of my community and want to provide some hope and leadership. While I'm running, I just want to provide the opportunity for people to feel engaged and be engaged. We need more trees. I say it a lot on the trail. We need more trees, man. You think about what a tree does. It provides shade, provides food, provides paper, provides shelter, provides beautiful landscape. It does all these awesome things, but it does everything for everybody but itself. And if we have leaders, public servants who are willing to be that model of a tree to provide those attributes and those qualities of leadership for everybody but themselves, I believe we can have a comprehensive change that everybody could feel that reverberation of positivity.
And again, you've been listening to What's Real Talk, KUAW. The two guests that we had on today was Ed Bell, candidate for the 26th District State Representative, and Dylan Bird, candidate for the 26th District State Representative. Ashley Bland Manlove is also a candidate. We did reach out to her and was unable to confirm her today. Again, July the 11th, there will be a forum held at Bluford Library with the candidates from the 26th District and also the candidates for the 2nd District Legislative County seat. So please come. Remember, July the 11th. Again, you can listen to What's Real Talk.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you very much.
God, I can't actually invite people. You can say it. I can't tell them. Yeah, I'm sorry, we want to get some issues.
It's
hard for me not to come. I seen it flare up.
Everybody say bye to Facebook Live.
Oh, we still on, yeah.
Everybody say bye to YouTube.
But like,
I'm out of practice, too.
like
weeks or something a year.
You know you're coming back on, right?
Oh,